Here we go.
The mics don't seem to be doing much, so one of them works, so we may or may not test it out there. those of you that don't know me, my name is Devin Hubbard. I am on faculty in Biomedical here, and then with my colleagues back there, we do medical device design. I teach medical device design as part of my group here. I happen to have a passion for AI and training in the area, and it's just an interesting subject to me. I'm also a former host of a podcast called Dialogue on the subject of medical device design. And I am joined today by a number of wonderful panelists. And I'll allow them to introduce themselves. But today we're having a fun conversation about AI and how it relates to costs, or maybe not relates to costs so much. So if you guys don't mind, I'll just sort of go through one by one, and each of you take a moment to introduce yourselves. So we'll start with Marcella.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marcella Dalrymple. I am MBA class of 2021, Carolina. So good to be back home. I work at Duke AI Health, and I do strategic development and business partnerships.
Good morning. My name is Amanda Barefoot. I am an undergrad UNC alumni, not a grad school alumni, but still run blue. I work at SAS Institute. I am a director of our health and life sciences business.
My name is Seth Lester. I am an actuary. Raise your hand if you know what an actuary is. I am so sorry. You can study up quickly if you read or watch Along Came Polly. It's a great introduction to actuaries. Anyway, I work for an actuarial consulting firm called Milliman. Before that, I worked with Amanda at SAS, helping healthcare stakeholders like payers and providers do analytical claims modeling, claims analytics, that kind of stuff. And then before that, I was at Cigna for many years. And that's actually where I learned to become an actuary. So thank you for having me today. Lovely campus.
All right, cool. You guys, hold on. So I was, interestingly, on my way up here, I was talking to somebody about this. I think the first place to start is getting everybody on the same page with what is AI and sort of how do we see it in healthcare. So the first question I want to ask you all is, how would you define artificial intelligence, and perhaps specifically in healthcare?
Do I have to go first?
You can.
You don't have to.
Oh, my director will be so disappointed. So artificial intelligence really stands for algorithms that can be developed using language. Those are usually called unstructured algorithmic developments or models. That's like your large language models, your ChatGPTs, those things. And then you have mathematical models, which are considered structured models that utilize mathematics and very, very complicated formulas that I don't understand, but it's a fun time. I don't know. Do you want to go into more depth, Amanda?
I'm going to keep it much higher level, actually. So realistically, to me, it is where a machine is taking the place of a human action, right? I think of it very simply. So, the title of this panel being hyper reality. I think there's a whole lot of hype around something that's been real for a very long time right now.
There is a public shift in the way that we think and regard AI. So up until about 2 years ago, really machine learning models were the bulk of what I worked with as an actuary. But now when we think about AI, we really think about these LLMs. And that's sort of the changing the way that the public is talking about AI. But AI, just to be very clear, includes so much more than LLMs. And we have to talk about that. There's different approaches, so it's important to take a step back and also remember that if it doesn't come from the specific AI region of France, then it's just sparkling regression. Really important to remember that.
I think Seth moonlights with stand-up comedy, if you didn't realize this.
Excellent. Okay, so out of curiosity, one of the things that because I assume everybody in here comes from different backgrounds and may not have the same depth of knowledge about AI. One of the questions that I frequently like to ponder is, how do other people perceive or understand AI? And sometimes I frequently encounter individuals that maybe I wish they knew something different, or maybe I wish they understood AI differently. So if you were to summarize your experience in this department, could you tell me what you would wish a layperson understood about AI that is maybe often confused or misunderstood? In particular, in the healthcare systems and like maybe how people think it's being used versus how it's actually being used, and or what they think the applications could be versus what they actually are. And then, or what do you think you wish they knew that might change their perspective on that?
Yeah, so I was talking actually with my parents who were keeping my children last night when I came to the dinner here, but telling them about this panel that I'm doing today, and I was like, let me just ask a, upper 60s individual, what do you think AI is, right? And they're like, well, I don't really know. I guess it's like when the computers get sentient. I'm like, okay, guys, let's pause for a minute here. So I do think, realistically, we have a large population in our world that thinks that is AI, is when the robots come to life and the computers take over and they do things. It's very true. I know it sounds silly to a lot of us in the room who probably know differently. So when I hear about, what do you want people to know about AI, or what's often misconstrued about AI, it's that, right? That's not at all. How many of you have an iPhone? And maybe an Android does this too. Okay, did you use your face to unlock your phone this morning at some point? Congratulations, you have used AI today, right? Realistically, it is true. So I think my perception, right, I work mostly with health plans and provider systems. I think that we overcomplicate so much this idea of AI. And somebody said it well. Francis, I believe it was you this morning on this panel, right? The concept of the Nokia phone and the iPhone here, right? People are coming at this and saying, I have to have AI right now to solve all of my problems, when realistically, you're probably already using it in maybe just a limited fashion in your healthcare organization. Take, for example, a predictive model that's going to tell you from a behavioral perspective for your membership, if you're in a marketing position in your health plan, who's most likely to age in from this commercial health plan into my Medicare product? So I'm going to retain this customer. That is using AI in a machine learning way to be able to help you make a decision. I see AI not as taking over. It's simply an intelligent assist. That's what it's meant to be. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think, especially the older generation, I think mostly they're fearful of AI. I mean, they were fearful of the internet. My grandmother was like, no, it's going to get my social security number somehow, I mean, and I'm not, well. But AI is, today where we are, AI is not going to be a robot going through the ER, triaging patients. That's not what it's going to look like. AI is actually used every day in your medical care. If you're going to the doctor, especially if you're an older adult and you get your regular checkups, there's something in the computer that the doctor's looking at that will give them a risk score for certain chronic diseases like stroke or Alzheimer's or something. And that utilizes AI on the back end. We've used it every single day. And what we are trying to focus on is how can, well, clinicians want to use AI to solve all their problems, but what we're really trying to focus on at Duke is the ethics of AI, right? When it's touching a patient and helping make a clinical decision, we want to make sure that it's not going to exacerbate any type of healthcare disparities, because the AI that's already being implemented is usually trained on very modest data sets. And so we have methods in place where we'll evaluate different algorithms before, newly developed algorithms before they touch actual clinical care.
Thank you. So those risk scores that you talked about, over at Milliman, I actually work for an organization within Milliman called MARA. It stands for Milliman Advanced Risk Adjusters. So we actually produce those risk scores. We build the models. We train the data, or we train the models on a data set of over 75 million lives, right? And you're exactly right that we all emit data trails in our interactions with healthcare, and those data trails inherently are a mirror into the systemic biases that are very prevalent in society. And that exact a pattern of systemic bias goes right into the model if you're not careful. So you do have to be very careful about the training and the execution of the model. So the number one risks that we have to talk about with AI, and back to your question, we have to make sure that the general public is informed of what these things actually are, how are they made, what's going on under the hood. So for example, LLMs. Who here has played the fun game where you just type in a word in your iPhone and you just map autocomplete over and over again? You say, it predicts your next word, you say, I'll take it. It predicts the word after that, I'll take it. And then you see what kind of bizarre text it makes. LLM work very differently than that. It's an auto-regressive method, so it's looking back on what it said previously, and that's why sometimes they can hallucinate or take the chat into a really weird direction. But there are guardrails there to keep it from doing that. So, now that you know, that might be very useful for you as you use ChatGPT, as you're a consumer of ChatGPT. Would you trust, now that you know that information, would you trust it to do clinical triaging? Yeah, maybe you wouldn't, right? Maybe you would like to know what other guardrails are in place, right? So that's the kind of thing where we need to. And then lastly, the executive order from the Biden administration on Tuesday. A friend of mine sent me this article in Variety. Joe Biden grew more worried about AI after watching Mission Impossible, says White House deputy. So we have to, however people are and are monitoring the risks, that's important. Let's get the word.
Keep going on this LLM train because I know we were going to go down it. Yeah. So course correct me where you want to, Devin. But with this, right? You mentioned guardrails. I think there's a lot of guardrails beholden on the user as well when it comes to LLMs. Think about everyone's played with ChatGPT, yes, in some way, shape, or form. Okay. So you put in a question, ChatGPT. I want real life. This is what I did. I need a LinkedIn summary statement about myself. Okay, generate a LinkedIn summary statement for Amanda Barefoot. And kind of what it came out with was she's a marketer. I am not a marketer. Okay, that's interesting, right? But you have to play with it and respond with it. Don't just take that first response and go. Take that and play with it and say, okay, well, what if I was a marketer? What if I was focused on, consulting, business, way, shape it, shift it. If people are using LLMs and not putting the right guardrails, even if to say, let's think from a clinical decision perspective, pull all the research for me that tells me the best things to do for this diabetic patient, this age, with this complication. If I don't say from 2018 forward, am I getting a recommendation from 1950? And is that the clinically sound recommendation to make? I don't know. So we have to make sure that we put guardrails on this technology as a user of it, and that's when the training comes into play. So, just making sure the right standards are on it, so we're making up-to-date, correct, directionally correct decisions with that intelligent assist.
I don't want anybody to be scared. The doctors are not using ChatGPT to diagnose you. But what they are doing is utilizing algorithms, big data sets that would input all of your characteristics as an individual into that algorithm to come up with an output. And of course, all of these data sets have been validated, especially at Duke. They actually will not integrate any algorithm if it has not passed our evaluation and quality framework, which involves ethicists, physicians, nurses, all types of clinicians, all types of PhD researchers, engineers, that do a very exhaustive evaluation of the process by which these algorithms were derived, taking a look at what they're going to be used for, and ensuring that they will only be used for that specific use case, which is very similar to pharmaceutical drugs. We're making sure that these algorithms are not used off-label. And we also have an organization called CHI, which is the Coalition of Health AI, which, in direct response to the Biden executive order, is a convening and coalition of the willing of various healthcare professionals. I mean, you've got the Chief Innovation Officer at Microsoft, the Global Chief Medical Officer at Microsoft, Google, Vera, SAS. Oh yes, Steve Purdy. He's in every freaking meeting. And insurance standards and guidelines that hopefully the U.S. government will take a look at and be like, oh, you guys need to come up with an impressive list that we can incorporate into policy that will impact the entire United States and ensure that these algorithms are safe for you.
That's a perfect set of questions that I was going to ask you about. So, I think probably, I'm guessing these folks in here play with ChatGPT, and one of the concerns, even, I mean, this is probably happening everywhere. UNC actually recently had some training for faculty members on how to manage AI use in the classroom, and as it's a tool that I'm sure people are going to use no matter what, it's probably more about understanding the limitations of AI in the application, as you pointed out, right? Like, we're not using it to make clinical decisions. We're using it to help perhaps hone or narrow down or advise, as opposed to, hey, this is the answer for the person who may not know. And I think that raises two questions. One, what limitations do you see in existing technology as it pertains to, in particular, large language models, LLMs, in healthcare from your perspective? And then the other part of that is, what shortcomings do you think exist in the healthcare system that could be addressed by AI, or maybe that shouldn't be addressed by AI? So if we could start with that first one, kind of what limitations do you see in existing AI use in healthcare?
I would first say accessibility.
Yeah. Maybe we look to the mic. It's like in and out.
Oh, sorry. All right.
Good.
So I would say accessibility is the first thing that is a limitation of AI. The big beasts that have the resources that can develop these AI tools can get to use them first on their patients and help them improve clinical workflows, decisions, operations, and they get those immediate impacts. A rural hospital or community center may not, definitely does not have the resources to develop these tools yet and to evaluate them effectively and to implement them into their computer systems because they don't have 1,000 engineers at, the Berkeley County Hospital, right? And so I think that accessibility and equity in that standpoint is the first thing we have to address.
Yeah, so when we talk about disparities, so let's talk about first AI.
I'll talk about AI applications in the payer setting. Who here knows what prior authorization is? That's a dirty word.
Right, and prior authorization has been carried out by payers and providers, and to just get everybody up to speed, right? If you want some sort of service or care implemented by your provider, and your insurance company is basically the permission slip authorizer, right? So your provider needs to check with your insurance company to make sure it's covered. Your insurance company is going to say, no, that's not covered. Your provider is going to say, no, it really should be covered, and there's a back and forth. And up until regulation was released last year by CMS and other authorities, that back and forth took place via many media. Carrier pigeons, faxes, terribly insecure ways to send information about patients back and forth, right? There were no standards there. Now, we've got electronic digital standards. You may have heard of FHIR, F-H-A-R, right? That's going to make that a little bit more seamless over time. But then you've also got the capability for these LLMs
To do sort of that back and forth interpretation, right? Give me, you can't really get an LLM to do reliable triaging and diagnostics, but you can absolutely get an LLM to do a summary of information. Or, hey, can you evaluate this claim submission to make sure it is complete and there is not any missing information? Which is one reason why payers say they reject so many prior authorizations, just because the information isn't all there. And to be fair, they're a little bit right on that. So, it's and a lot of this is due to provider burden. They don't have the time to submit these prior auth packages to get approved. They don't have the time to put them together in the right way. An LLM can help them do that, right? An LLM could be the thing that takes all the clinical information that the provider has assembles it in such a manner that automates the prior authorization process so that all of that can be smoothly done, right? So there's two applications on both sides of the coin where we can solve for something like prior auth using LLMs. That's really cool because it does some mindless automation for us, and it puts things in a proper, format for us to free up our providers for things like seeing patients, which they really want to do more of and not do so much coding, right?
So you're going exactly down the road that I wanted to go down, which is what I think we've spent a lot of time already talking about the clinical application, and I think that's so often the first place that we go when we talk about AI. And while there is room for that, for sure, the low-hanging fruit by far is the financial and the operational space when it comes to payers and providers, and life sciences companies too. But realistically, exactly what Seth just described, if I can take the burden off of someone from, imagine you're the person who receives those faxes, the PDFs of those faxes that come through, because they still do. You have to rotate the page. You have to delete the pizza menus that are still coming through. You are not working at the top of your business person license when you're doing that. Can we let the computer do that job? So that you then, we're not taking your job. That's a fear. Can we eliminate that fear here for a minute? Everyone thinks it's going to take our job. The AI is going to take over and eliminate my job. No. AI is going to take away the burdensome things of your job that you don't need to spend time doing to allow you to use your brain to do the wonderful things that your brain can do. So that's where I think there's a huge opportunity, and where we see in my day-to-day, I'm talking to payer and provider leadership about how do you want to deploy analytical capabilities such as LLM, such as linear regression, such as all these other things that you want to put into your business. And the number one place where they want to go is operational and financial, because that's going to move the needle fastest for them on the cost that they have in their organization.
Yeah, another place for extreme cost savings and then increasing the speed of innovations is in clinical trials, right? AI can help you identify patients that would be eligible for your clinical trials much faster than having a group of people in a discussion like, hey, I think I might have 20 patients that would be able to do this. Let me go check. I might have 15. And that is really how we develop the population for a clinical trial, is we get doctors on the phone and we ask them, how many patients might you have at your hospital? It's also a great way to identify doctors to be PIs of these clinical trials, figuring out where doctors' interests lie and where their expertise is, and what kind of affiliations they have with different pharmaceutical companies, is going to help enhance the speed at which trials get started and followed up on, and then then we get the benefits of that research much faster.
Yeah, like Michelle said, so much guesswork right now in so many processes across healthcare and life sciences. Like, if we really ask someone, is there math that prove that, or is that just your gut intuition? Or your network, right? I would guess 70% of decisions, 80% of decisions are probably more in this guesswork, which makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And, again, the panel this morning talked about there's an ethical burden on this system. How much of that is left to guesswork? A lot. This is where we want to use math and science to allow us to make more educated decisions, and that's where.
And to create more complete data sets.
Correct. Oh, synthetic data can fill the gaps. Yes, absolutely. A whole other tangent.
I will say, right, that we talked about some places where innovation is going to happen with AI, especially as it accelerates, but I would expect to see implementation of LLM and other machine learning applications in the most deeply unsexy places possible, right? So when we talk about AI, it's like, oh, wow, we're going to revolutionize diagnostics. We're going to have a machine learning model that can, you just spit in it and then shove your CVS receipt in, and it predicts cancer, right? The sky's the limit. These machine learning models can do anything, right? That is not what we are talking about when we are talking about the proliferation of ML and AI in healthcare. We are doing extremely boring stuff with it, but stuff that frees us up. And frees personnel, and let's even talk about the massive provider shortage we're facing as the baby boom generation comes to this section of their life where they're going to need a lot more care, right? We absolutely need to find ways, like negative yesterday, to free up our providers so they can actually do the stuff stuff that they were trained to do.
Yeah. That actually segues nicely into the question I think about risk before I'd like to then talk about how it is cutting costs and how we are using it. But before we get there, I think the two questions that I have are, is the healthcare system ready for AI? And if so, where?
The healthcare system's already using AI.
Yeah.
So is it this is where I think the hype comes into play, right? Because it's just like everyone's like, oh well, I need AI in my business strategy. Pause, executive. Do you realize it's already in your business today? And if you, I mean, that's a lot of conversations that we have, right? SaaS tends to be a kind of think about like the spine, right? A backbone of a lot of different organizations because we've been around for so long and we're trusted in this space. We are the founder in the future when it comes to analytics, like AI space, right? So realistically, people are already using it, and so I tend to just kind of roll my eyes at that question. Not you, Devin, but that question is because it's just, to me, it's already there, and they're already using it, and they're too busy thinking about the sexy application to realize that the operational application, if they would just invest a little bit more there and their efficiency-focused strategies, they would achieve so much more.
I agree. I want to just say, when you were thinking about should I use AI, that's the big, most important question. Do I need AI? Or would just regular automation do? What if I just programmatically did some business rule steps? What if I, just wrote a simple script to do it instead of relying on an AI, right? And in many cases, this like, oh, we got to get AI in here. What? Do we? It's probably a lot cheaper and a lot faster and a lot less dangerous when we talk about model evaluation, checking for model bias, that kind of thing, right? Again, we routinely monitor the models that my organization produces for all kinds of systemic bias. And we also model for performance. You have an obligation to do that with AI, but if you just have a stack of business rules that are easily auditable and very transparent, you can save the work on auditing that. It's very easily implemented versus AI, right? So the big question that we should be shifting to is if you think you want to implement AI, first stop and say, do we need AI? Or could we just do something a little bit more traditional and automated?
And to go back to like the cost theme of this conference is AI is expensive.
Yeah.
I know that I pay like $1.99 for my Google storage. So for just junk emails that keep flowing in. But institutions that are developing AI or choosing to purchase AI or develop and run it and pilot it and evaluate and monitor, there are so many costs involved. And people have these great ideas. People come to me all the time with pitches of their new startup. I'm going to be able to diagnose any rare disease by any patient that comes to my door. Yeah, okay. What's your sample size? 100 patients at my clinic. All right, that's great. But what they don't realize is first, your use case has to be very, very small, very specific, like I said at the very beginning. And then you pay for the data, whether you're buying it from a data broker or data company, you're paying for the data, you have to import that data into the cloud. So that means you have to purchase cloud storage space. Two costs right there. And then you want to develop something, so that's computational costs, which exceeds data storage costs. And every time you have to rerun that model, that's like another, depending on how big your data set is, that could be like $100,000, $200,000. And then you want to deploy your model. And if you want your model to talk to the EHR.
I don't even know how much that costs, honestly, but it can't be cheap because EHR is really hard to get into, and it's really hard to get data back out of and then update a model. So, I mean, we're talking about like $1 million for a life cycle of a model that could impact, maybe 100,000 patients, but what organization has $1 million to pay for a model?
One model.
One.
So I'm going to go to something you just said. So Marcella is walking through, right, the life cycle of getting to that keyword deployment here. So talking, this is a couple years ago, but one of the big three health plans, talking with them with their data science department about, utilizing models that they have built. They're like, oh, we've built 120 models. What? How many are in production? One.
deployment is not easy from a cost perspective, but also from like a process change perspective. If you're going to put a model in place and no one's going to take action on whatever insights being derived from that model, congratulations, you're incredible computer scientist, data scientist. But it doesn't do anything for the business. So if you're going to be developing, if you decide, if you ask yourself the question, do I need AI? If the answer is yes, in this decision tree, okay, great. Do I have a deployment strategy that's actually going to get this thing over the line to where whatever insights I'm getting to will be acted on to then move the needle and actually generate some form of an ROI? If there's a question mark, don't start with AI. Like, answer that question before you start on this path.
Here's similarities in the model development and deployment path that Amanda just described, and the molecule discovery and drug pipeline path, right? It's kind of the same expenses,
Yes.
same headwinds.
Yes.
You are doing a lot of model and data discovery, feature engineering, all of that up front. It's very akin to the things that you would do in a lab in an academic setting.
Yes.
And then when it comes to a data science team, working on testing and training models, that could be analogous to phase 1 and 2 clinical trials. And after phase 3, you're ready for deployment. And
Let me write this down.
the pipeline.
But the pipeline, right? You know, we all know that all these molecules,
What's the survival rate of molecules from beginning to end? It's quite small, right?
Yes.
You know, for and we can pick on something popular like GLP-1 therapies, right? Really important, society-changing thing that just came out. And if we don't want to do that, we can talk about Epclusa and Harvoni from 10 years ago, right? A 6-week
oral regimen that cures hepatitis C. Wow, that's amazing, right? But that drug discovery process, people were motivated to do it, even though the odds are quite small that something great will come out of it. So there is absolutely value there, but there are a million other routes that that can get us to a final model. And you have to be very careful as a data science team and as a person starts
standing on this side of that pipeline. You have to be very well informed of the costs and the risks of all of this energy going into it and nothing coming out of it. That's very plausible and happens to data science teams all over the industry.
Yeah, on that note, actually, I think that's perfect to discuss risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think when people think of risk in AI, they're like, oh my God, sentient machines, right? But I think that isn't really the true risk. I mean, in addition to the risk associated with developing a model, which I think is one item to the question earlier about what do people not understand about AI, right? AI takes a lot of work and a lot of information to train properly, and even then, it doesn't always perform optimally for its application. So, are there other risks that maybe we should be thinking about? Is a question that kind of pops into my mind, aside from just model development, like in the healthcare setting in particular.
I think you've already touched a lot on like the bias risk that we have here, right? And the inaccuracy of the information that might be excluding some vulnerable populations in this. And that's why we have an executive order now that, that's why politics are talking about AI. That's why we have organizations like Duke, like Mayo, that are wanting to put together standards to say, yes, this is approved, there is no ethical risk. Because we realize now that that is like the next avenue of riskiest business, I guess. Here, and those are data references that you guys are old enough this is like our parents' generation movie. Anyhow, but that is something that I think is extremely important. It's just recognizing that if we don't have some of these ethical guardrails, politics are getting involved, academic institutions are getting involved. If your system is not thinking about that, if your organization is not thinking about who could I be harming with this, then you're not thinking about it right now.
And then you open up your business to lawsuits.
Oh yeah.
We saw that with Cigna, right? And I think that was an eye-opening experience to a lot of payers and healthcare systems. Like, oh, snap, we're liable for what our models are doing to people on the other end. And that's why there's such a big push to like making sure that we're validating these algorithms and that they're ethical and equitable, right? my boss did a paper on the stroke risk prediction model that is widely used across the globe for decades, was considered the gold standard. Turns out it was under-identifying African-American patients by like maybe 30–40% for an early interventional treatment for a medication, which, think about that long term, that means that they were delayed in seeking treatment for stroke. They're more likely to have a stroke. And then considering all the other contextual implications of how they will be treated once they are a stroke patient in a hospital, they're more likely to have death outcomes, morbidities that will impact them for the rest of their lives. And not just impact them, it'll impact society in the sense that now we have to care for someone who is now out of the workforce, cannot care for themselves if they have like one of those really debilitating morbidities as an outcome. And then where else was I going?
And that continues with the families too. I mean,
Yeah, everybody.
The cycle continues. If we don't get in front of this, then think about how many of you have had to be a caretaker for a parent or a relative, right? Is that what do they call us? Like the sandwich generation? Those of us who have children and also have to take care of our parents right now. That is very real. And so when the health system fails you by excluding something that could have been preventative for a parent of you, right? So that's when we sit up here and talk about ethics, right? Like put a personal lens on this. Think about your aging parents. Think about yourselves or spouses or children, right? Just age doesn't mean you get sick. Anyone can get sick. We want to make sure the system doesn't fail them. We have to put ethics first. I think we'll around that right now.
How many of you have used ChatGPT to write a section of prose or a paragraph that you didn't feel like writing?
Or help guide you.
Give
me a starting point.
Give me a starting point, whatever. Now, how many of you ran that through a plagiarism check? Because you should. You absolutely should, right? That is the kind of thing that you can easily do. You can easily stumble upon someone else's copyrighted material. And there's evidence of that happening, right? So you have to be very careful if you're using these LLMs for any kind of production of content with respect to marketing. Do be careful that you are not actually just recycling or upcycling somebody else's content that went into the model. Also, huge IP lawsuit conditions are brewing against OpenAI and similar competitors because they trained their models on data out there in the wild. Not really clear that they have the right to do so.
And commercialize it.
Yeah, and commercialize it, right? Not very clear. We'll see what happens, but there's a really good chance that the legal reckoning for OpenAI is some ways down the line, but it is coming, right? So just you have to bear that in mind that there are many more risks that we're going to learn over time. They're still becoming evident, and it's not just so this conversation about risk isn't here they all are. There's many more that we'll discover in the future. And that's just with LLMs when we were also talking about machine learning models, right? And again, that stroke index. There's other indices that we've been using over time. There's social determinants of health indices that are based on areas where people live. Are those racially biased? There are risk scores that I use. We have to make sure that those aren't racially biased.
And we're also making sure that those risk scores aren't used in a way
that would perpetuate racial risk. So it's not just, hey, is there any racial bias in the training data set, but also are you employing these models in a way, even if we've made darn sure that they don't
respond to target responses that are
confounded by racial bias,
are they being used in a way that will
continue to perpetuate it, right? So you have to also think about the risks of use separate from the risks of what's going on under the hood of the model. Many, many risks to think about going forward.
Yeah, sure, we can do that. But before we jump into audience questions, if that's okay, the real question is, does the AI boom? Are we?
Yes.
Are we? No, I mean the panel topic is the AI boom and reducing healthcare prices. So, question for you all, and this is just yes or no: is it hype or reality or both?
It's down the line.
I hype a lot of hype. It's really hard for me society thinks about them. I like to think of the Pareto principle when we think about reducing costs, right? That 80% of our avoidable costs in the system probably come from a very small amount of deeply burdensome and unsexy chores that we have to do. And AI can help with that. But what we are not going to see AI doing anytime, anywhere, is using facial recognition to diagnose behavioral health conditions. That's silly. You should openly laugh in the face of somebody who suggests that. I was at a conference really recently at Health Startup Conference and encountered many people who have solutions like this that they want to sell. All you have to do is speak into the microphone about how your day was, and we'll detect whether or not there's anxiety or depression. And my question is, okay, is there a ground truth basis? Do you have a paper, right? What are, I can talk about anything? Because, and I asked the guy, I was like, are they reading the answers to the PHQ-9 screening tool into the microphone when they're doing this? Because with that I would believe. But I don't think that we have, anywhere credible or any evidence to believe that any kind of diagnostic capability is mature yet. So again, really think about AI as doing program integrity or payment integrity, prior auth, these really deeply boring things about healthcare operations, and to some extent maybe things like feature engineering, automated, synthetic data production, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to diagnostics, like high.
And I think that the cost savings, they would be down the line, as in like in the future, right? And as I said that, I'm like, actually what it'll do is it'll increase access for more people to be able to have the treatment that they need and the care that they need, but that's just going to increase the demand. And then I started thinking about the little, from, what's the professor's name here? I don't know, the supply and demand curve, and I was like, I have no idea where that would put us on the curve. Yeah, I have no idea as we increase the health demand.
Let's take a question from the audience. Don't look about it. We have so many questions. Yeah, I've got my little timer here. Third row.
Thank you. So I work in customer experience at UNC Health, and we are working really hard on improving our digital front door. So right now, I'm looking at AI tools for an omni-channel chatbot, and also for quality assurance for our call centers who are scheduling all of our patients. The salespeople who have my phone number have invented fire, and they can show me an ROI tomorrow. But one of the things that really seems to be a differentiator is natural language processing. What do I need to look for in considering the RFP that ensures that something that really is iterating through all of these conversations is taking the bias into account? Because that model is not set in stone. That model is building itself as it goes. And to me, that can be a little scary about the bias piece.
Yeah, in the sales world, which is where I am, so I'm an actuary who hops my algorithms to other actuaries. That's what I do. and of course, I have a say about marketing and all that stuff. But I would consider what's under the hood, right? Because there's natural language processing has a big space. There's sentiment analysis of that being employed. There's also, and I'll bring us back to, there's these tools that you can invite a bot to your Teams chat or your Teams call, and it will monitor your Teams call, and it will tell you, oh, you talked too much, or you didn't ask enough questions, or it'll tell you all of these things, and you should have a good deal of suspicion about what's causing it to give you this feedback, whether that's an evaluation of sentiment analysis, or if